Hello patron and welcome back to my life. Writer Wednesday, where I give you tips and advice on the art and the business of writing and tell you how I do what I do as an indie author. First up, we don't have any questions in the queue, so I'd like to encourage you, if there's something that you want to know about writing or publishing, drop it in the comments on Patreon or YouTube. This video series is for you. But left to my own devices today, I want to talk about something about the craft of writing that I don't feel like I've seen other authors talk about in writing books or whatever, and that is the moments that make the book. Maybe authors have talked about this in writing books that I haven't read yet, because it turns out there's actually a lot of them, but I haven't seen it, and I first started realizing this was a thing before I started writing, when I was doing more study of movies, when I myself was writing and directing films. And I started to realize that there were certain movies that had lines that made the movie. These lines become immortal. They last in the viewer's mind long after the movie itself has faded from much social relevance. And in the best case scenario, they become like an indelible part of the social lexicon. Star Wars, of course, has a million of these lines. Do or do not, there is no try. Use the Force, Luke. No, I am your father. You have failed me for the last time. The list goes on for quite a while. But what's funny is, even movies that have not achieved that level of success do have these immortal lines, and those lines keep the movie relevant. Even when the movie itself doesn't affect things directly, they are still talked about and remembered years or decades afterwards. For instance, you're probably very familiar with these three lines from the movie Jerry Maguire. You complete me, show me the money, and help me help you. Jerry Maguire was not a smash blockbuster hit. It's not like some thing that has a cult following now that people still watch all the time. If anything, when people refer to it, they generally talk about it in the context of the time that Tom Cruise came closest to winning an Academy Award. But those lines are part of the reason we still remember that movie and sort of what it was, and maybe even view it more favorably than other similar movies that came out around the same era, like for example Wonder Boys or Good Will Hunting. And at the same time, you don't have to have these super memorable lines in order to be a very successful film, and even one that lasts and is still relevant. There's very few lines that make the movie in the Marvel films, for example. But if you take a look at some of the most iconic and enduring books of the last many years, lots of them have moments that have remained with us, that we will remember forever, that make the book, the moment that makes the book. A lot of them are endings, and I just thought of this one while I'm recording the video, so I'm going to toss it in here. The ending of A Tale of Two Cities. I don't even remember the character's name. I want to say it's Sydney, but when he sacrifices himself and says that line, "It is a far better thing I go to do now than I have ever done. It is a far place I better go to than I have ever been." That moment, I remember that moment, even without remembering the character's name. I remember how I visualized it. It's and that book is, of course, well, I mean, it's Dickens, but it has still endured. My favorite sci-fi novel is Ender's Game, and if you remember that book, you remember the ending. No spoilers in case you haven't read it, but boy, you know what I'm talking about. That ending was a moment that made the book. But you also probably remember the fight scene in the shower. That moment made the book for me, more so than the ending. I will never forget it. Harry Potter is full of moments like these, and spoiler alert for the whole Harry Potter series, because I'm going to discuss a few of these moments in the books. You'll notice that sometimes the lead up to the moment is not nearly as important and definitely not as memorable as the moment itself. I barely remember why Harry and his friends snuck into the Ministry of Magic in the book Order of the Phoenix, but I will never forget the moment when Sirius Black died. And that goes for other major deaths in the series, but for those, as with Sirius, the moments that lead up to the moment are not the memorable thing. It's not the journey. It is the end. It is the moment itself that stamps itself in our minds and just becomes part of us. So why should we go for crafting these memorable moments in our books if it's possible to be successful without them? Well, it's just what I've been saying. These moments make our books last in our reader's mind for a much longer time, and that is kind of the effect I want to have on my reader. As authors, we want superfans, right? We want people who don't just read our books, they talk to their friends about our books so that their friends read our books, right? When superfans talk about books with their friends, they talk about these moments. When you're describing a story to a friend, whether it's a book or a film or a TV show or something, if you're really trying to get them into it and encourage them to go and experience it for themselves, you'll usually start off by saying, all right, so there's that part That's a moment. That's something that stuck with them, and they want somebody to experience that. They want somebody to read that part and go, oh, the same way that they did. Yes, we want our whole book to be an enjoyable experience for the reader. I'm not saying your moments should be awesome and the rest of your book should be drivel. In fact, if you tried to do that, your moments would suck too. But just like we have to learn that our books are not going to appeal to everyone on the planet, and so we need to nail down the people that we actually want to reach out to, we have to realize that some parts of our book just aren't going to be as interesting as other parts. And that ties into how we go about crafting these moments. What makes the moment that makes the book? That's a little bit of a dicey question, but for me, it is narrative and thematic satisfaction. Let me get this opinion out of the way first. Books have themes. They all do. Your book has themes, whether you intend it to or not. And so, as with everything else in the books that we craft, we may as well spend some time thinking about these themes and trying to construct them and use them well in our books. And really, truly satisfying moments, the moments that make the book, are the encapsulation or the summary of the book's themes. Going back to movies, just for one example, the reason "No, I Am Your Father" is such an incredible line is because the whole theme of Star Wars is about Luke trying to war between the light side of the Force and the dark side of the Force within himself, and he suddenly realizes that the dark side of the Force is an inescapable part of who he is. Going back to books and Ender's Game, the whole reason that the shower fight scene is so amazing is because for the whole book, Ender has been warring within himself, knowing that he can be incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous, and so he restrains himself. He knows that if he unleashes the full might of his strategic thinking, he can hurt people. And that moment is the moment he acknowledges he'd rather do that. He'd rather kill someone else than die himself. That's a crushing realization to Ender and to the reader, and it's why, to me, it's the most meaningful part of the whole story. Meanwhile, the entire point of the Harry Potter series is that people have been sacrificing their lives to save Harry since he was a baby, literally. I mean, that's how the whole thing starts. And all he wants to do is stop that from happening. But then, because of Harry's actions, Sirius, the closest thing he has to a living parent, ends up dying. And Harry has to confront the fact that it's not up to him. He can't stop it. He's not the person causing all of this to happen. And like, boy, that's a thing to realize, isn't it? Now, the moments that make your book don't have to be tragic ones. The moment that made the book Looking for Alaska by John Green for me was the pure, unfettered joy and exhilaration experienced by the main character and his friend when they go on that impromptu drive at the end of the book. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. And that emotional release is not only so necessary after everything else that's happened in the book, but it's the fulfillment of the whole thematic narrative of the entire novel. And it's just so masterfully done. And that scene, I'll never forget it. So in summary, the moments that make our books will remain with our readers and stay on their minds long after they've turned the last page and put the book back up on their shelf. And if we do it really, really well, even if they never read the book again, they will never forget the moments that made the book for them. That's it for today, patron. Again, if you got something you want me to talk about on the writing or the publishing side of things, drop a comment in YouTube or Patreon. I'm here to help you with anything you might be struggling with. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye!